our government formally adopted the EU Digital COVID Certificate 1 month ago. This will no doubt ease the way to a resumption of travel by employees, particularly within the EU area, by removing the need to quarantine on their return home to Ireland. The certificate is accepted as evidence that an individual has been fully vaccinated against COVID-19, has recovered from COVID-19, or has had a negative test. To date, the government has sent out nearly 3 million of these certificates. Employees returning home from a holiday within the EU, and this includes Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, and Switzerland, will not be required to quarantine if they have this certificate. Sensibly, particularly given the current prevalence of the Delta variant, countries operating the COVID certificate system have retained their discretion to limit travel from certain states and to advise against travel in certain circumstances. For this reason, it is very important that all travellers check the public health advice, document requirements and restrictions in place in the country they plan to visit. Difficulties may arise for employers if public health advice changes whilst employees are abroad. And the rules may be different if employees are travelling from countries which are identified as designated states. There are currently approximately 30 countries on this list of designated states, and within Europe, the countries include Georgia and Russia. Travellers coming from designated states who have not got a vaccine must pre-book and enter mandatory hotel quarantine on their return. Travellers arriving from a non-designated state who have not received a vaccine must present evidence of a negative PCR test and self-quarantine or self-isolate for 14 days. This will be difficult for employers to monitor and navigate, particularly given the recent guidance from the Data Protection Commissioner, which has made it clear that at present, the processing of employees' vaccine data is likely to represent an unnecessary and excessive data collection for which no clear legal basis exists. Now, the Data Protection Commission has acknowledged that situations may arise where employers need to be made aware of when an employee will be available for work, and after travelling to Ireland from abroad and undergoing any required periods of self-isolation. However, they go on to say that it should not be strictly necessary for employees' vaccination status to be recorded in such instances. Rather, the employee can be asked to indicate the date on which they will be in a position to return to work. This, of course, can potentially leave employers in very difficult circumstances if an employee is not available to return to work after returning home from a holiday. If it's possible for the self-isolating employee to work from home during this period, then they should do so and continue to be paid in the normal way. If the self-isolating employee's role cannot be performed effectively from home, then an employer could consider moving the employee on a temporary basis to another role during the self-isolation period that would allow remote working. However, this will of course depend on the particular employee's role, their skill set, their level of experience, and whether or not they'd be willing to consent to this change. And it may not always be possible. Another option is that an employer could request that a self-isolating employee takes extra days holiday to cover any self-isolation period. This will depend on the employee having sufficient annual leave entitlement remaining. Whilst this approach will ensure that the self-isolating employee continues to receive full pay until they were able to return to work, employees may be reluctant to take additional holiday if this will leave them short of annual leave for the remainder of the holiday year. A compromise could be for the quarantined or self-isolating employee to take part of the self-isolation as annual leave and the remainder as some type of special leave or unpaid leave. Whatever decision is taken, an employer will need to make sure that it adopts from the outset a clear and consistent approach on requests to use annual leave to cover any mandatory self-isolation periods. And of course, it's always advisable to record this in writing.